picture this scenario. It's late on a Tuesday. It's pouring rain outside, and you are just completely drained from a long day.
Oh, we've all been there.
Right. The fridge is empty. You really don't want to cook, and you certainly don't want to drive anywhere in that weather. So you pull out your phone, you tap a brightly colored screen a few times, and like 30 minutes later, almost magically, a hot container of pad thai appears at your doorstep.
Yeah. Or, maybe you have a flight to catch. You need a ride to the airport at 4 in the morning.
Exactly. You tap a button, and a car is just idling by your curb before you even put your shoes on. For you, the consumer sitting on the couch, it is the ultimate frictionless convenience. I mean, the app handles the payment, the routing, the timing. It's totally seamless.
It is, yeah.
But have you ever paused to think about the actual physical reality for the person sitting behind the wheel, the person who is absorbing all that friction so you don't have to?
Well, the interface you interact with is actually designed to keep that reality invisible. The consumer app is smooth, it's playful.
Very user-friendly.
Right, but the mechanics operating just beneath the surface of that screen are incredibly complex. I mean, we are looking at a system that relies heavily on a workforce operating under extreme pressure. They're often absorbing significant personal and financial risk just to make that late-night convenience happen.
And that hidden reality is exactly the mission of our deep dive today. We are looking at a truly fascinating academic paper titled Slavery versus Exploitation in the Gig Economy.
It's a heavy title.
It really is. The goal here is to figure out if modern gig work, your ride shares, your food delivery platforms, if that actually crosses the line into modern slavery. And if it doesn't cross that criminal line, what should we actually be calling it?
Okay, let's unpack this, because for a curious learner who really wants to understand the hidden mechanics of everyday life, this paper completely reshapes how we view the entire convenience economy. It really pulls back the curtain on those apps we use every single day. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the rapid rise of these platform-based services has really forced legal scholars and sociologists to reevaluate our foundational definitions.
Definitions of what exactly?
Well, of employment, of autonomy, and of coercion itself. You see, for over a century, labor laws were built around a very specific model, right?
Like going to an office.
Exactly. A physical workplace, a boss you could physically speak to, a set schedule. But we are dealing with an entirely new model of labor now, one that operates completely outside those traditional bounds.
It's testing the limits of what a society considers acceptable work.
Precisely.
Well, that brings us to the fundamental question of this source material. Let's look at the legal framework first. Is gig work legally considered modern slavery in the places where these apps are, most popular?
Under current legal frameworks, and the source specifically analyzes the jurisprudence in the United Kingdom, the United States, and Australia, the answer is a definitive no.
Okay, so it's not slavery.
Right. Gig work is not classified as modern slavery. The courts in these jurisdictions rely on what the paper calls the legal threshold.
So what actually constitutes that threshold? Because I have to imagine the legal definition of slavery hasn't exactly been updated to account for smartphone apps, right?
It generally hasn't, no. Legally speaking, slavery is defined by an absolute total loss of agency.
Meaning you have zero choice.
Exactly. The courts look for severe coercion, active deception, or direct physical and legal control over a person. So the legal systems in the US, UK, and Australia view gig workers as free agents because of two main technicalities.
And what are those?
First, the worker operates under a terms of service contract that they have formally, legally agreed to by signing up.
Just by checking that little box on the app.
Right. And second, they retain the technical autonomy to choose when they log on to the app. And crucially, they have the legal right to stop working, close the app, and go home at any time.
So basically, the law sees a worker who is not physically restrained from walking away and concludes that this simply cannot be slavery.
That's the current legal logic, yes.
I hear that, but I have to push back on that legal logic. Saying a gig worker has the freedom to leave simply because there isn't a literal physical lock on the door feels incredibly outdated.
It is very 19th century.
Yeah. It's like saying a door is technically unlocked, but if you walk through it, you immediately step off a 300-foot cliff. Sure, you have the physical ability to turn the doorknob and walk out.
Yeah.
But is that an actual meaningful choice?
That's a really good analogy.
Right. If the legal framework only looks for physical chains or locked doors, is the mere technical ability to close a smartphone app really a valid way to measure human freedom in the 21st century?
Well, the paper argues that it is a deeply flawed metric. The source explores this tension as the ethical gray area.
Okay, the ethical gray area.
Because the legal definition provides a clean binary answer, but the lived reality of the workers exposes a massive blind spot in that old legal vocabulary. The law focuses purely on what is called freedom of contract.
Meaning your legal right to just say no to a job or to log off.
Exactly. But it entirely ignores what sociologists call substantive freedom.
Okay, wait. I need you to break down substantive freedom for me. That sounds like a very academic term trying to quantify a very human struggle. How does it differ from just, regular freedom?
Substantive freedom is your actual, tangible capacity to survive if you choose to exercise your legal right to say no.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right, so freedom of contract says you can decline a ride request, but substantive freedom asks, well, what happens to you if you do decline it?
What are the consequences?
Exactly. When the only alternative to logging on and completing that late-night delivery is destitution, homelessness, or, failing to feed your family, the concept of a voluntary choice essentially becomes a legal fiction.
Because extreme economic necessity just steps in to do the exact same job as a physical lock and key.
Yes. The threat of absolute ruin becomes the restraint. The paper points out that economic pressure functions as a highly sophisticated indirect form of coercion.
That is so dark, but it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, the platforms don't need to physically force anyone to drive at 3 a.m. They simply rely on a labor pool that lacks the substantive freedom to turn down the income.
No matter how marginal or dangerous the work might be.
Exactly.
I want you, the listener, to really imagine this mechanism playing out in your own life. Think about your current job right now. Imagine if calling in sick for just one day or deciding to log off an hour early meant immediate, catastrophic consequences.
Not just a slap on the wrist.
No, like not just falling behind on an electric bill next month, but immediate eviction or starvation. Would you really feel like you had the substantive freedom to walk out the door?
Most people wouldn't.
Right. Even if there is no physical manager blocking the exit, that level of economic gravity completely overrides your technical autonomy. You are tethered to the work by circumstance.
It really forces a reckoning with how we define coercion. But, what compounds this structural economic trap in the gig economy is the highly specific mechanism used to manage these workers while they are inside that system.
Okay, so if the door is unlocked, but walking through it means financial freefall, we have to look at what's constantly prodding them while they stay in the room.
Yes, exactly.
And it's not a human manager doing performance reviews. It's the literal software on their phones. So how does an app actively manage a human being who is supposedly, an independent contractor?
Well, the paper introduces the concept of algorithmic management, which establishes a hidden hierarchy.
A hidden hierarchy?
Yeah. The app is not just a neutral digital bulletin board matching a driver with a passenger. It is an active, dynamic management system. And it exerts control entirely through data collection and behavioral psychology.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because the algorithm is constantly tweaking the environment to manipulate the worker's behavior.
It utilizes real-time data to deploy nudges, gamification, and surge pricing incentives.
Like those little pop-ups on the screen.
Right. The algorithm calculates supply, demand, and individual worker habits. Then it dangles financial carrots to ensure the platform has enough labor in specific areas at specific times.
It's literally like playing a rigged video game where your actual livelihood is on the line, you log in, and the algorithm is just constantly moving the goalposts.
That's a very accurate way to put it.
You see a message pop up like, complete 3 more rides in the next hour and you'll unlock a $50 bonus. So you push yourself.
You take risks.
Right. You drive a little faster, maybe you ignore a warning light on your dashboard, or you stay out working a notoriously dangerous intersection because you desperately need that specific bonus to make rent. The app is actively steering your physical behavior in the real world.
And it pairs those financial carrots with a very heavy algorithmic stick.
The stick being?
The constant threat of deactivation. Workers are evaluated relentlessly by customer ratings and acceptance rates. If a worker's metrics drop below an opaque, algorithmically determined threshold, they are deactivated.
Which is, for all intents and purposes, termination. You are fired by lines of code, with absolutely no HR department to appeal to. Like if a drink passenger spills something in your car and leaves a 1-star review out of spite, your overall rating tanks.
And you suffer the consequences.
Right. The algorithm automatically triggers a deactivation and suddenly your income goes to 0. You can't call a supervisor to explain the context. The machine just turns off the tap.
This represents a monumental shift in liability. We have moved from a traditional employment model where an employer assumes legal responsibility for managing their workers to a model of highly managed yet legally distanced labor.
Legally distanced. I like that phrase.
Yeah, the platform dictates the worker's behavior down to the minute, it controls their pay rate dynamically, and it retains the power to terminate them instantly. Yet, legally, the platform claims no responsibility for their safety or minimum wage.
Because they maintain the stance that the worker is just an independent business owner utilizing their software.
Exactly.
So the algorithm is the ultimate micromanager. But legally, it's a ghost. I mean, that kind of digital manipulation is stressful enough for an average person trying to supplement their income. But the source material takes this into much darker territory, doesn't it?
It really does.
It explores a specific demographic of workers for whom this algorithmic pressure cooker is exponentially more dangerous.
Right. The paper introduces what it calls the vulnerability multiplier.
A vulnerability multiplier.
When you take the intense pressure of algorithmic management and apply it to an individual who completely lacks legal protections in the country they reside in, the potential for severe abuse just skyrockets.
So we are talking about undocumented individuals and migrants without formal work rights operating within the gig economy.
Yes. Now, the paper is careful to clarify that lacking formal work rights doesn't automatically equal slavery.
Sure.
However, undocumented status creates a terrifying double bind for the worker.
Let's walk through exactly how that double bind works, because it's not just a matter of being undocumented. It's how the gig platform structure interacts with the state's laws, right?
Exactly. So imagine an undocumented worker experiences a severe labor abuse on the platform. Perhaps it's wage theft, where the algorithm mysteriously shaves $50 off their weekly earnings.
Or perhaps a customer physically assaults them.
Right, that happens too. Now, a legally recognized citizen would report this to a labor board, they'd file a police report or sue the platform. But for an undocumented worker, the calculation is entirely different.
The fear of alerting the authorities about the missing $50 completely outweighs the need to get the money back.
Because if you raise your hand to the state and say, hey, this tech platform is stealing from me, you are simultaneously revealing your undocumented status to a government entity.
Right.
The worker knows that filing a formal grievance could trigger an investigation that ends in their deportation.
Man, there is a truly dark irony hidden in that mechanism. The legal system, the very apparatus designed to prevent human exploitation and uphold basic rights, is inadvertently functioning as a tool for the platform's exploitation.
That's the tragedy of it.
The tech company doesn't even need to hire enforcers to silence complaints or threaten undocumented drivers. The state's deportation laws do the enforcing for them.
The threat of state intervention effectively acts as the platform's uncompensated HR compliance department.
Wow. Uncompensated HR.
It completely neutralizes the worker's ability to advocate for themselves. I mean, they have to endure whatever the algorithm dictates, whatever glitches short their pay, because the alternative is being removed from the country entirely.
It creates a captive, incredibly compliant workforce.
Within an app that publicly champions flexibility and independence, no less.
So what does this all mean? If we are looking at an economy characterized by extreme systemic economic coercion, if we have digital manipulation treating human beings like variables in a high-stakes video game, and if we have a system where undocumented workers are effectively trapped by the threat of deportation, why should we just call it modern slavery? Why is the academic source so insistent that we stop trying to use that specific word?
What's fascinating here is that the paper is not attempting to defend the gig economy's practices by clearing it of the slavery charge.
Okay, so it's not letting them off the hook.
Not at all. It makes this distinction because precision in language dictates precision in policy. The argument is that labeling gig work as slavery risks stretching a specific criminal legal term to the point of total dilution.
Oh, I see. It's almost like trying to prosecute modern cyberbullying using laws written for physical assault in the 1980s.
It's like a great comparison.
Right. The psychological damage to the victim is incredibly real, the behavior is destructive, but the old legal vocabulary is totally obsolete. If you try to force a cyberbullying case into a physical assault statute, the case just gets thrown out and the perpetrator walks away.
That is an excellent way to frame it. If every instance of severe economic coercion and unfair labor practice is labeled slavery, it obscures the fight against genuine forced labor.
You mean situations where human beings are physically locked in compound factories?
Yes, or trafficked across borders, and subjected to a total, inescapable loss of bodily agency. The legal definition of slavery requires the absolute removal of the ability to leave.
Whereas exploitation is a different mechanical beast entirely.
Exploitation is the persistence of unfair, abusive, or degrading labor conditions within a framework where some degree of exit technically remains possible.
Even if walking through that unlocked door leads to immediate poverty.
Exactly. The door itself is not bolted shut. Therefore, the paper concludes that the gig economy is best understood and regulated as a fertile ground for intense systemic exploitation.
It doesn't meet the criminal threshold of slavery, but the conditions it fosters are just fundamentally undignified.
Propelled by algorithmic management, yes.
Saying it's not slavery is definitely not the same as saying it's fine. It is categorizing the problem accurately so that legislative bodies can actually design a solution that works.
That's the key.
Because if we spend all our time arguing over semantics in the courts, the tech platforms just continue operating as usual.
The debate over the slavery label has really acted as a massive diversion. The paper argues we need to shift the discourse entirely away from trying to fit new technology into 19th century criminal statutes.
And move toward what exactly? Establishing modern protections.
Yes, systemic protections tailored for gig workers.
Okay, so if the label of slavery is legally off the table, what mechanism is actually capable of reining this in? Are we just waiting for individual governments to slowly catch up to the algorithms? Because the source mentions a new international framework, right?
It does. The paper highlights a major path forward relying on the upcoming 2026 adoption of ILO Convention number 193.
ILO being the International Labor Organization.
Right. The ILO is establishing a clear international framework to shift gig work toward a model of decent work.
But how does an international labor convention actually force private tech giants to change their code? I mean, the ILO doesn't have a global police force.
No, they don't, but it works by creating a standardized international baseline that signatory nations must integrate into their domestic law.
Oh, I see.
Once ratified, it provides labor unions, advocacy groups, and trade agreements with tremendous legal leverage. A country cannot participate in certain trade agreements if its domestic laws violate core ILO conventions.
So it creates immense top-down pressure on national governments.
Exactly. They are pressured to draft domestic legislation that actually regulates these algorithmic platforms.
So what specific mechanisms does this decent work convention actually demand?
It targets the exact mechanisms of exploitation we've discussed today. First, it demands transparent algorithmic management.
Okay, so workers actually know what's going on.
Right. Workers must have access to how they are being evaluated, how the algorithm determines their specific pay rates, and how decisions about deactivation are calculated.
The hidden video game rules must be made public.
Yes. That immediately strips the platform of its ability to silently manipulate behavior through those opaque nudges.
That's huge. What else does it demand?
Second, it requires formal mechanisms for redress. If an algorithm flags a worker for deactivation, there must be a mandatory human review system in place.
Allowing the worker to appeal the decision with actual context.
Precisely.
So you can actually explain that the one-star review was a hostile passenger, not bad driving.
Right. And finally, it demands core social protections for all workers, explicitly regardless of their immigration status.
Meaning an undocumented worker could report algorithmic wage theft or unsafe conditions without the platform or the state, using the threat of deportation to silence them.
The source argues that stripping away that vulnerability multiplier is totally essential. An international framework that addresses the technology itself is really the only way to transform the gig economy.
From a landscape of intense exploitation into one of, sustainable employment.
Exactly.
Wow. This has been a deeply revealing journey. To summarize what we've unpacked today, gig work, as it exists right now, might not technically meet the criminal definition of modern slavery.
Legally speaking, no.
But we can clearly see that platforms hiding behind the technical freedom to log off are really obscuring a vast spectrum of intense exploitation. We've looked at how extreme economic coercion replaces physical chains.
How algorithms manage behavior through dynamic pricing and the constant threat of invisible termination.
And how the state itself inadvertently traps undocumented workers inside these systems.
It really challenges us to look past the frictionless convenience of the service and acknowledge the deep vulnerability of the labor force providing it.
Absolutely. To you listening, the next time you use a gig app, Whether you're ordering that pad thai or grabbing a ride to the airport, try to look at the interface a little differently.
It's hard once you know what's behind it.
It is. Look past the clean graphic design and the ETA timer. Really acknowledge the invisible data nudges, the surge pricing psychology, and the immense economic pressures that are guiding the physical movements of the person on the other side of that screen.
Because understanding the mechanics of the system is the very first step toward demanding a better one.
And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. Something that builds on everything we've just explored about digital control.
This is the really scary part.
It is. If our current legal definitions of labor exploitation are still so outdated, still based on physical coercion and human managers, how long will it be until this kind of hidden hierarchy bleeds out of the gig economy entirely?
It's a very real possibility.
We've seen how effectively, and frankly ruthlessly, an algorithm can manage a driver or a delivery person. So how long until algorithmic management, dynamic pay rates, and automated deactivations become the standard in traditional salaried corporate jobs? Will an algorithm be your next manager? Keep questioning the systems around you, stay curious, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.